You're with Fran Kelly, RN Breakfast.
And this latest extraordinary chapter in Labor's poisonous leadership wars was provoked in part by the Resources Minister Gary Gray, who taunted Kevin Rudd basically to put up or shut up. Well, Kevin Rudd took that advice and Julia Gillard has lost the Prime Ministership. Gary Gray's in our Parliament House studios. Gary Gray, welcome to Breakfast.
Good morning, Fran.
If Kevin Rudd will have you, will you remain in his cabinet?
Kevin has asked me to stay and I have agreed.
And how will that be, given your criticisms of Kevin Rudd in recent times? Let me quote you. You said Kevin Rudd can spread confusion, create torment. He can get himself into the media, but he can't govern. He doesn't have the courage and the strength that's required.
I did say those things. That's an absolutely accurate transcript of my comments on Friday. I now have to deal with a reality, and the reality is that my caucus colleagues have spoken. A new Prime Minister has been appointed by the Labor caucus, and I have a responsibility to make a decision. I have made that decision, and Kevin has asked me to stay in the portfolios that I currently serve in, and I will do that.
So how will you feel being in the cabinet, working for a Prime Minister who you don't think has the courage and the strength required for the job?
Look, my comments on Friday were heartfelt comments. They were made in the heat of anger and frustration. What I have to deal with now is the decision by my colleagues to change the leadership of the Labor Party. And my decision in that context is to stay as the Resources Minister. Now, I'd also like to say that last night I spoke to the Minerals Council annual dinner. I spoke at length in place of the Prime Minister. And Fran, when I spoke at that dinner, I made a mistake. I made a bad judgment. I listened to advice. I was told that President of South Africa, Nelson Mandela, had died last night, and I made comments assuming that information was correct. I was wrong, and I've apologised today to the South African High Commissioner. I will apologise to the Parliament. I had wrong information, and I apologise for publicising wrong information last night at the MCA dinner.
Thank you for bringing that to our attention. The South African High Commissioner was accepting of your apology?
I've communicated that to her this morning.
Okay. Just back to the Labor leadership, you clearly underestimated the numbers, the support for Kevin Rudd and for Julia Gillard in the caucus. You urged him to put up or shut up. He did, and he won. Why do you think the numbers have shifted so dramatically against Julia Gillard?
I think the political distress felt by caucus members at the political state of the government. And it's clearly the case that the overwhelming view of caucus members was for a change. That was not my view. That is not what I did. That is not how I campaigned. But now I deal with a reality that there is a new Labor leader, and we have to get on with the business of having a government that is working in the interests of all Australians and going to an election as soon as possible.
Well, you're going to be campaigning for the re-election of a Rudd government. As I mentioned, those comments you've on the record. What are you going to be telling your voters in the electorate of Brand about why they should vote for a Rudd government when you've described him as you have?
I'll be explaining that the Government of Australia is a complex business. I'll be explaining that the policy platform of the Labor Party is the policy platform of the Labor Party. That is about education, that is about jobs, that is about healthcare, that is about the NDIS. The policy agenda of Julia Gillard was the right policy agenda. That policy agenda is something that I support. I supported her. The leadership of the party has changed, and I must make a practical and pragmatic decision, and that's what I've done.
So your view is that Julia Gillard had the right policy agenda. She spoke last night after she was dumped as Prime Minister of the difficulties which arose from internal opposition. In your view, was Julia Gillard's Prime Ministership killed off by internal division? In other words, Kevin Rudd's campaign of destabilisation?
Yes, it was. There's no doubt about that at all.
And now he is rewarded for that.
But what there is equally no doubt about is that the people of Australia will vote on who should be the Prime Minister. The people of Australia will vote on who should be a government, and the people of Australia will vote on who will be parliamentarians. They will make that decision, and they will do it within weeks.
It's a bad precedent for Labor to reward disloyalty, isn't it?
I think the internal behaviours of some in our caucus over recent years have been simply beneath contempt, and I've made my views about that very clear. I'm now in a situation where I have to accept the decision of my caucus. I have accepted that decision, and I'm prepared to get on with the business of working as hard as I can to get the government re-elected before the election due in just a few weeks' time.
And the chances of your re-election, you hold Labor's most marginal seat in WA, 3.3%. Do you have a better chance of holding Brand under Kevin Rudd?
I think I have a worse chance, not because of the leadership of Kevin Rudd, but because I've made clear to my constituents my strong support for Julia Gillard. So I know that that position will create a massive local difficulty for me. Having said that, I have to get on with the practical, pragmatic business of helping the government be as good as it can be.
Can Labor win?
I believe that with a good campaign, a focused ministry, that we stand more than a chance of winning, but we can be a good government in the future.
Gary Gray, thank you very much for joining us.
Thank you, Fran.
Gary Gray remains the Minister for Resources and Energy.
You're with Fran Kelly, RN Breakfast.